Our China correspondent joins me now. Peter, it's been so long in the planning, so long in the dreaming. It's been such a big moment for China. What do you think the country will have made of it tonight?
I think a huge amount of pride from the people of China. You could see it on the faces of the people outside the ceremony, anyway, down in Beijing, glued to the screens. This is a wonderful showcase for China. 4 billion people are watching that. 4 billion people, and what a display case for the new China. So the people very, very proud, and what a price tag too. This opening ceremony that we've just witnessed cost £3,000 a second. £3,000 a second. It is the most expensive, the most lavish, the most high-tech and innovative Olympic opening ceremony we have ever seen. Directed by the film director Zhang Yimou, who did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and really a spectacular. It must have been so wonderful to actually been in that stadium to see it.
Well, the people now starting to emerge. We can see the pictures of them coming out, streaming out of the Bird's Nest Stadium. 80,000 or more guests, 15,000 performers, 5,000 or 6,000 athletes. There are tens of thousands of officials and volunteers and so on, all soaking up the atmosphere as the torch burns brightly over the city. I wonder, Peter, after all the controversy about these games and the protests and the politics that have gone on and the worries about pollution, whether maybe all that, they can draw a line under a lot of that and now move on with the games themselves?
It's a very good point. I think that tonight the organisers and the Politburo will breathe a very heavy sigh of relief, and there'll be a heartfelt hope that in the coming 3 weeks that the world's attention will now focus on the athletes and not the activists. China's been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons since the Tibetan demonstrations in May and in March, and then the subsequent deployment of tens of thousands of Chinese troops. The round the world relay, 80,000 miles, was a public relations disaster, especially at the beginning. I think they're hoping, as so often happens, that this is a very politicized game, but perhaps now, once it starts, that countries, nations' interest will focus on how their own teams are doing and focus on the games, as I say, and the athletes, and not on the politics of this.
They certainly took no chances today, though, did they, Peter? I mean, it was very hard to move around the city for all of us. There was pretty much a total security lockdown, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was indeed, and it was interesting to see in Beijing as the games were about to start. The place was almost deserted. Tiananmen Square was locked down. All the main roads just had just a handful of vehicles on them, and this huge cordon sanitaire that they described around the Bird's Nest, with thousands of ordinary Beijingers who couldn't get in, didn't have the tickets, didn't have the passes, but still just wanted to be there and had travelled out. But the security operation, I mean, they must be very, very pleased with that. Up till now, it's been absolutely flawless. There have been a few more arrests of protesters. But I think tonight the security people will also be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief too.
Thanks very much, Peter. Peter Sharp down at the Sky Bureau across the other side of the city. And as Peter was talking about, pollution, one of those things that has been a major concern in the run-up to the game. So we at Sky News have been testing the air quality here in Beijing with our own equipment and comparing it to UK readings. And what we found today, pollution here measuring 333 micrograms per metre cubed. And compare that to the latest London daytime reading, peaking at 37 micrograms. So air quality around 9 times poorer here in Beijing, whatever the authorities say. You can see data for other UK cities as well with these latest air quality readings. And what are the much feared protests and disruption? Well, in contrast to the noise and lights of the opening ceremony, the streets of Beijing were kept relatively quiet today. Sky's Ian Doverston reports on a city in lockdown.
Without hint of resistance, Beijing, a city and its people, has succumbed totally to the Olympic spirit. When Beijingers were asked to vacate their own streets, they dutifully did. Among the authorities here, there is no appetite for big screen gatherings, however momentous the occasion. The highways were devoted Olympic through routes, or they were empty. So where those enjoying a public holiday could, they collected along curbsides to watch the road. Not because they wanted to cross, the police wouldn't let them. Their hope was to spot a famous face among their new Olympic occupiers. The US President George Bush was in town, opening Beijing's new US embassy and reiterating his government's criticisms of China's human rights record.
Continue to be candid about our belief that all people should have the freedom to say what they think and worship as they choose. We strongly believe societies which allow the free expression of ideas tend to be the most prosperous and the most peaceful.
Tiananmen Square evokes memories of one of China's darkest days almost 2 decades ago. But all that seems forgotten tonight, where youthful exuberance has taken over.
Well, this is Tiananmen Square, and the enthusiasm for the Olympic Games is quite unbridled here. They've never seen anything like this before in Beijing, and the Chinese people are enjoying their time in the spotlight.
This man tells me we're Chinese. We are coming to support the Olympics. And this woman says she came to Beijing for the Olympic Games because it excited her so much. In China, these next 16 days, the 5 rings will rule. And Beijing will attempt to embrace this opportunity like no city before it. Ian Doveston, Sky News, Beijing.
What about those anticipated protests? Well, Tiananmen Square was sealed off today, partly because of the fireworks show. Chinese authorities on high alert, as Ian was saying. No major incidents, but not so elsewhere. More than 200 protesters gathered outside the Chinese embassy in London to voice their anger at China's human rights record. Many of them Tibetan exiles wearing red headbands with "killed" written on them. Across Europe, protests continued. Hundreds gathered outside European Union buildings in Brussels, chanting anti-Chinese slogans and waving Tibetan flags. In New Delhi, more than 1,000 Tibetan exiles held a rally calling for an independent Tibet and marching over a poster of the Chinese premier. Police and soldiers stood by with tear gas and water cannons. And this was the scene in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, as pro-Tibet campaigners gathered outside the Chinese embassy's visa office. More than 400 demonstrators detained there by police. And in Hong Kong, a British man was arrested after unfurling banners on a bridge that denounced China's human rights record. But right here, everybody has been concentrating on the opening ceremony itself. Probably very few of them will have been aware inside China of those protests around the world. And as we can see, they're still pouring out of the stadium, having enjoyed some 4 hours of entertainment this evening. Dazzling show. The lights are still bright across the city there around the base of the Bird's Nest Stadium, the nickname for that spectacular stadium of 40,000 tons or more of metal that looks very much like a bird's nest, very much a feng shui creation by the Swiss architects. And those are the lucky ones who had tickets to go to the opening ceremony, but millions and millions more Chinese have been watching at home on television, many ordinary citizens. And Holly Williams, Sky reporter, has been out with one family here in Beijing to get a taste of what it's like to absorb all this great spectacle tonight. Holly.
Hi, Jeremy. Well, you had a spectacular bird's eye view of the opening ceremony. I got to watch it here in a living room in central Beijing. The tickets for the opening ceremony this evening cost between £100 and £2,500. Now, to put that in perspective, that's several months, even several years' salary for your average Chinese worker. So tonight, as you said, millions in this country, almost certainly over 1 billion people, watch the ceremony at home on television with their friends and family. Now, I'm in the home of Chen Chang.